You're listening to the Roofing Success Podcast, a show created to inspire roofing contractors to achieve optimal success in their roofing businesses. I'm the host, Jim Moline, the co-author of the book, Internet Marketing for Roofing Contractors, How to Triple Your Sales and Turn Your Roofing Website into an Online Lead Generation Machine. I'm also the co-founder of Roofer Marketers, the digital marketing agency for the roofing industry. On each episode, I'll be sitting down with industry leaders to talk about their processes, the lessons they've learned, and how to find success in roofing. Hey, thanks for listening to another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast. Just a quick note, if you find value in this, if you're finding value in these podcast episodes, I really appreciate it if you guys would like this, share it, comment. It really means a lot to us. We're trying to provide as much value to the community as possible, to the roofing community as possible. And so by liking, by sharing, you're just getting the word out a little bit more that we're giving you the right information, and we're helping more of you along the way. And at the same time, look in the description. My phone number's in the description of each episode. Send me a text message if there's something that you want to hear about, something that you want more information on. Would love to, if you want a specific guest on the podcast, if you want to request a specific guest on the podcast, or if you feel that you yourself would be a great guest on the podcast, shoot me a text. We'll see if we can get you on. Today, I'm really excited because this is, we have a true veteran of the industry on with us today, and someone who has developed a style of leadership that's beyond, kind of above and beyond, and even has become kind of a leader and mentor and actually a coach and speaker on leadership through the John Maxwell organization. And if you haven't heard of John Maxwell, get to Amazon right now, buy those books and start reading, because it's some really amazing information. And has been the CEO of Queen City Roofing in Springfield, Missouri, for many years, and an employee at Queen City Roofing, for just over 40 years. So the amount of knowledge that this gentleman holds in the industry, is top notch. So I'm really excited to welcome Larry Stock to the show. Larry, tell our audience a little bit more about yourself and Queen City Roofing.
Sure will, and thank you very much for having me, Jim, and compliments to you. I hope we can add some value to your listeners today. So I started here at Queen City Roofing back in 1979, and actually I'm from Kansas City, which is about 3 hours north of Springfield here, but I'd gotten married. My wife wanted to move home, so I don't know if any of your other listeners have gotten into that, but generally what mama wants, mama gets most of the time. That's right. So I came here to Springfield and was looking for a job, and actually hadn't had any construction or business background when I landed my position as a field worker for Queen City Roofing. But when I visited with the owner at that time, I agreed that I would try it for 3 months to see if we mutually liked it or not. So I actually worked in the field for a short amount of time. Then I came into the office as a estimator, and we were a very, very, very small company at that time. And we did both residential and commercial work. And so I was there in 1983. The company was actually going to close. I'd been there 4 years, and the company fired the general manager. They were losing money, and they were going to close it up. So kind of a funny story about how I talked the board into keeping it open, and that was simply by telling them I could guarantee them I'd lose them less money. So they gave me 3 months. They thought that was actually pretty funny too. They gave me 3 months, and I was able to start the turnaround, and so that was back in 1983. But actually, a lot of what I've learned, I think probably like a lot of your listeners, I've learned through mistakes. So I'm going to fast forward like So that was 1983. They were going to close the company. I talked them into keeping it open for a while and became general manager. About 20 years later, then I entered into a deal to buy the company, and actually simultaneously, I happened to read a book that significantly impacted me. So at this point, I've been working about 20 years in the company. Like so many of your listeners, I'm sure, it was nose to the grindstone, always never being able to move outside of a urgent box for activities, 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. And I happened on the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. This is in the late 90s, at running simultaneous to the time I was going to buy the company. And we all get different takeaways from books. We get a different takeaway if we read a book twice, Jim. But the line that really impacted me at this point, which is kind of funny because I'd already entered into a deal to buy the company, but the line that really had impact on me was that most business owners are fooling themselves. They don't own their companies. Their companies own them. And that was so true.
Wow.
So true and so impactful to me. So I'm a slow learner, I guess you could say, because while I've been in the business 41 years, it really was about a 20 years and working hard till, quite frankly, I came to the point where I just go, I can't continue to do business this way. So I started making some shifts at that time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And Rich Dad Poor Dad was one of my favorite books when that came out. And then there's another book that he wrote called The Cash Flow Quadrant, and
Right.
that's also that's been really impactful for me too. And along those same lines, it's are you a business owner or are you self-employed, right? In the cash flow quadrant, it's employee, self-employed, business owner, and investor. Those are the four quadrants. And he talks about how a lot of people are self-employed but feel like they're business owners. That means that their business does not work for them; they work for their business. To your point there. So you guys, one of the things that you had mentioned was, you'd convince the board, hey, I'll lose you guys less money, right? And I know that you've done, you have a presentation that you've done many times about knowing your cost.
Yes.
Was that some of that kind of, is that what led to that, or is that how that kind of came together?
Yes.
Where you learned that?
Yes. And specifically, the general manager that I was working for when I got hired, and I didn't have any business or construction experience either. So I immediately went to night school for business. And in answer to your specific question, Jim, my general manager that they let go that I worked for at the time did not understand financial statements. And I'm a believer that there's nothing wrong in not knowing something, but if you don't know, you either need to find out, learn about it, or get somebody around you who does. So in this particular case, so I had some business courses. I knew what a financial statement was, and I assure you our board certainly did too. And in this particular case, Jim, to your question, the general manager at that time didn't even realize that if you're losing money up at the gross profit range before you even get into admin, that's bad news. And so specifically and they asked me when I said, I can guarantee you I can lose you less money. And they said, well, how can you guarantee that? And I said, well, quite frankly, if we didn't do anything except pay me a salary, you would lose less money. So it wasn't that they were buying into that, but they thought it was funny. It showed a little bit of an understanding of the financials. And so that started that. But so many contractors, even today, work so very hard. I think there's primarily, you'll find different types of people in the contracting business, but you have those very talented craftsmen or tradesmen that try to start a roofing business because they think it's so easy and companies make so much money, and they can be a great skilled craftsman or tradesman, but they don't understand basic business. And quite frankly, that gets back to, you talked about your quadrants. That's where they psychologically can say they own their own company. when in reality, somebody could come in and say, you would be a lot better off working for somebody for X amount a year than that. But knowing your cost is crucial. It's absolutely crucial. And I'm astounded even till today how a lot of contractors don't. And without looking at your financials, and you don't have to be an accountant by any means. There's plenty of help you can get, but so many people work themselves into a hole because they don't know their costs. They make estimating mistakes and repeat those. And then the ultimate thing is somebody's losing money, and they think the answer to losing money is they need to do more work. And so that just spirals them down the rabbit hole even quicker.
Yeah, just like you said, if you're losing money on the gross profit side, right? That every job you take is just is digging. It's just another shovelful, right? It's another shovelful, right? Another shovel in the hole, and so that's that's an important thing to think about. What would you tell kind of a contractor, a business owner who maybe hasn't really learned how to manage their finances, or really hasn't tightened up that side of things? What kind of advice would you give to them? What kind of actionable steps could they take to begin to get a hold of that side of things and really get that in line?
Great. That's a great question. And I think I have a couple of suggestions along that line. Number one, my first suggestion is acknowledge and realize that doesn't make you a lesser person because there's an area that you don't know. So I've never been this kind of person, but there are a lot of people that, I don't know if it's pride or what, but they simply don't want to admit what they don't know. And there's nothing wrong with not knowing something at all, or at least I've never felt that way. Just learn about it or find somebody that could help you. Now, to answer your specific question, in today's world, and I do think it's paramount to understand the financials, or you can work and you can't get ahead. And without understanding financials, I'd even argue, with exception of being lucky, you're not going to be able to get ahead. You could be making, if you don't review your estimates, et cetera, and make a mistake on estimating labor or whatever, you can just continuously repeat those. Now, specifically to your answer, I would suggest, as I would in general, that you can find a mentor or a coach, or available to everybody, Jim, is the SBA offers a great program called SCORE, SCORE, and plugs that's free, emphasis on free for people. You can look on the score.org website, and they will provide a mentor that you can sit down at no charge, sit down and casually visit with. And that website also, and in today's world of all the information on the web, it's not that hard to find information. So the first step is acknowledging that, hey, I may need some help here. Again, you don't have to be an accountant. I'm not an accountant, but you need to know the numbers. And one of the values of knowing the numbers is that's how you can measure things. And if you can't measure something, it's hard to improve something.
Definitely. I'll leave links. So for everyone listening, look in the description of the podcast, and I'll put a link there to the score.org so you can get to that easily. But of course, there's so much information on the internet, but it is, to your point, is take action, right? You have to first understand maybe your weaknesses in business. I always think about it in terms of weaknesses. I'm always trying to work on my weaknesses. So, hey, if I don't think I'm as good in this area than that area, then I'm gonna work on that area. And that it doesn't need to be 100% on me. It could be, hiring the right person, finding the right mentor, as you mentioned, things like that. But, closing those gaps, right? Working on your weaknesses, making them your strengths. You had mentioned that when you kind of came on board with the company, you guys, they did residential and commercial, and now you guys just do commercial work. What led you to being a commercial only contractor?
Well, great question. And first off, let me say I have the utmost respect for for the companies that can do residential roofing and do it well. quite frankly, and we were actually split probably about 50-50, but there were two things that primarily led to it. Number one, in our area here in Southwest Missouri, there was a change in the way work was being done, and that is that builders started buying the materials directly themselves and then just hiring people per hour or whatever to put the shingles on, let's say. That was number one. That was becoming an issue. And number two, quite frankly, and I've listened to several of your podcasts, and this is why I tip my hat to residential people. At that point in time, we were quite a bit smaller company than we are now, Jim, but I was running into more headaches on a residential job than I would on a larger commercial or industrial job. And it quite simply got a risk reward thing where, as the people that are in residential roofing know far better than I do, on a residential job, you can lose. There's going to be hiccups on any given job. On a residential job, my experience was you could lose whatever profit you had pretty easily on a snafu, where as in the commercial and industrial arena, hopefully, and we're all going to have snafus, but hopefully there's enough money or margin in there to take care of the problems. So it wasn't a complicated thing. It was just an easier decision for me to a path of least resistance.
Nice.
Well,
nice. And so I would assume that part of that, there was you built up I guess a sales pipeline on the commercial side too, right? You were attracting those commercial jobs or going out there and getting those commercial jobs. What did you guys do from a marketing and sales perspective to kind of grow and build that side of the business?
That's been a lengthy ongoing process, and so I am kind of an old school guy. So of course this was back even before the internet or all that. So it was just basically networking at that time, involvement in things like the Chamber of Commerce and Rotary. Now our town has evolved here too and gotten quite a bit larger. When I started in '79, there were 4 contractors in Springfield, Missouri. Today there are 120 contractors. Yeah. We probably, everybody, all of us think that, oh, you don't understand, our area is different, but I will say that Springfield, we have to have, let me just say this, probably as many roofers per capita as about any city around. But it was slowly built up, and then so there was some referral work, but a lot got back, Jim, quite frankly, to the benefit of knowing our costs. So even today, a majority of our work is hard bid work, but that's where the knowing your costs has really come in. And we started about 10 years ago to try as hard as we could to focus, and we're doing better on negotiated work and repairs and things. But it's really knowing your costs, constantly looking at those, and that's how we build our business. We also started about 20 years ago, probably started a sheet metal division, and that's done real well. We're about 50-50 now with roofing and roof related sheet metal. That has expanded into exterior metal panels. So that was a big fortunate move that I made about 20 years ago.
Oh, nice. If you were someone that wanted to start a commercial roofing company today, what to generate your first sale, what would you do? What do you think you would do to say, hey, all right, I'm opening a new shop. I need to get a project going. Where would you start?
With a yellow flag and a word of caution. Everybody's business is always easier to run. And
it is, yeah.
So you see residential people getting into commercial getting into residential. But to your specific question, I believe you really, when I started back in '79 in the commercial roofing thing, it really truly was very simple. There were only 2 questions. Is it going to be 3-ply or 4-ply? And is it going to have gravel or not have gravel? And that sounds funny today, but that was true back then.
Yeah.
All there was hot roofing, 3-ply, 4-ply. gravel or not gravel. So back to your specific question, I think I really believe I mentioned SCORE before, but SCORE as somebody who will help for free. But I really think that the answer to that question is similar to starting a lot of businesses, and that is really look at the market. There's a difference between what we want to do, what we think we can make money at, and what will work in a given area. So my first inclination and response would be, is your market presently served? Because the more it's served, the tighter the margins are going to be.
Yeah.
And commercial is significantly different than residential. Not better, not worse, just significantly different, because a lot of times you're dealing instead of with it. Well, you have to decide, do I want to do new and re-roofing or just new roofing? So you have to make some choices. So my advice to somebody considering it would be talk to somebody, even if they were outside of your market, and visit with an established commercial contractor about what it entails, because just like any other business, it has its challenges and obstacles. It can be good, but it can be really challenging, and it doesn't cost as much today. One of the challenges in roofing is there's no barriers to entry. For example, in Missouri, all you have to do to be a roofing contractor is say you are, and supply houses will forward you the money, et cetera. But just talk to people and make sure that you've thought it out and done some financial projections. And just because you have a friend that'll give you one job does not a commercial roofing company make.
Definitely. One of the things that I thought was really interesting there, and what I want to bring it back a little bit, is understanding your market and understanding the market that you're serving within that, right? So whether you're residential or commercial, roofing contractor, I think that's an important part with any business, right? Understanding your market, choosing a market that potentially is underserved, or choosing a market that is served, that has, maybe a more competitive has more competitive margins, but having a competitive advantage within your company where you can manage the lower margins or something like that, right? There's a couple of different ways to look at it, probably, in that regard. But knowing what I like to talk about a lot of times is knowing your perfect customer too, right? And can you identify your perfect customer, and knowing what you're going to be good at or not good at, knowing what you have crews for, what your crews are better at than other, things like that might also help with that, help in determining exactly pinpoint accuracy on who you're trying to target, and that you can serve that market well. I think that to kind of reiterate what you said there, I think that might be
I agree with that, Jim. And secondly, I would say, whether it was a residential person thinking about going into commercial or vice versa, you better have somebody on your team that knows that business like the back of their hand. It's not an area you can jump into. I'm not saying you have to know it, but you better have someone that does. That does know it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great information for sure. As you guys, you guys have really built speaking to the people that know things in your business. You guys, I don't know how many employees do you guys have now at Queen City? Or
we presently have 10 in the office and 55 in the field.
Okay. So in regards to that, I know, what you guys have built a strong company culture. We've had conversations about this before where, about the way that you guys have built your company culture. And I would assume that, the way that you learn and soak up, information and have, really gotten into the leadership, the John Maxwell leadership stuff, has probably led to some conscious thought about developing your culture. What do you guys, kind of what's the basis of your company culture there? How did you come about, bring that about and find, kind of the right fit for everyone and what they do on a day-to-day basis?
Great question.
Lots of questions in that question, I guess.
That's a great question, and it evolves and changes daily. But
yeah,
kind of, I think probably one of the starts of that is, and I'm not bragging or complaining, but I started working when I was 12, so that's back before minimum wage or child labor laws, clearly.
Yeah.
But in the course of my working, developed a real respect for people, no matter what it is that what job they're doing. I think a lot of owners in any business or in life kind of look over, take what people do for granted or foo-foo, when in actuality, in the roofing contracting business, it's our field employees that represent our company and actually that make money for us. I mean, we can do what we want, but it's the proof's in the pudding and the production. So through the years, and I'm a big believer, and as I told you, Rich Dad, Poor Dad kind of kicked it off and led to a change in my way of doing things, where I decided I was really going to invest in people. And what I mean by that is, I told you there were only 4 companies in town when I started. So I didn't have anything to really model after anything. And the money that we were making back at that point in time, the amount of money was small, but actually what we were making our money on wasn't on good production or efficiencies. It was basically, in retrospect, because we weren't paying any money in overhead, if that makes sense. So
Yep.
we were making money, and which led to the 12-hour days and all that. But through the years, we have formed, and it does evolve. We have formed basically. I know the value of mission statements. We really don't have one. So there I go. I know the value of them, but we don't have one per se. But we do have what I wanted something the guys could get their hands around. So we have what I refer to as our four columns that we operate on. Those being safety, quality, teamwork, and respect. Safety, quality, teamwork, and respect. And what I found, Jim, and that was developed in conversations with our team, but what I found is those apply not only internally, but externally, not only with and among members of our own company, but also then taken externally to our vendors, suppliers, et cetera. So those are the cornerstones of our operation, and always trying to make sure we're doing the right thing. But with those pillars, any questions that come up can be addressed to one of those pillars, and if it complies with it, then that's a good way to go. And if it doesn't, that's not a good way to go.
Oh, so you have essentially you're measuring decisions that you're making against the 4 columns, 4 pillars.
Right.
Whether it's a safety. If it's a safety question, hey, should we implement this safety policy or should we not? Let's weigh it against our thoughts on it, or this pillar. Is that what?
Yes, exactly. And especially in the roofing business, that's always paramount. We want our people to go home. We want them to make sure that they make it home at night. And I'm real proud of our mud factor. But what you said is exactly right. And it makes it so it's always safety first and foremost. Yes. But the other things, the quality, the teamwork, and the respect, they all just go together like a hand in a glove. And where if you can operate to the highest level, and that has to do with our foremen showing respect for their workers, our project managers showing respect for other project managers, et cetera. So I know those sound like vague terms, but to me personally, I just found that more useful than a mission statement that we might put up on a wall or something that really was kind of hard for the guys to get their hands around.
Can you maybe do you have an example of how that was in conscious use recently, or a specific time that you've had to kind of weigh a specific situation against those 4 pillars or those pillars?
get good question, and yes, and it comes up frequently. Probably, we actually had the safety, quality, and teamwork in place for several years, and we just added respect about 5 years ago as a fourth pillar, and probably, and we talk about that at our weekly meetings and our monthly general meetings. We always focus on one of those, but probably if we try to keep that foremost in all of them, probably the one that comes up the most is respect, that can relate to specifically. And the reason I say that is that comes into how people are treated both internally and externally, Jim, and also very, very much has to do with an ability to communicate, which I'm also very high on, because without respect, it's really tough to communicate properly. Yes. So we have, and I'm thoroughly convinced that I've never seen a number on this, but in my opinion, and this does tie into the four columns, particularly among respect, because I'm convinced that about 97% of the problems that we run into personally or business wise can be traced back to a miscommunication of some type or lack of communication, which can then be tied directly into respect, because if I don't respect you, it's hard to listen and hear what it is you're saying. I tend to listen more so I can jump on it or respond. But so it's the respect one that actually comes up that there are numerous examples of, if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah, definitely. And I know, I think another presentation that you do is around kind of the communication and listening and things like that. What are some things that you could point out that might, help people develop those communication skills a little bit more on a higher level to reduce the amount of those, the issues that arise from lack of communication?
Well, right. And communication's gotten even more complicated now. Yes. In the day of texts and emails, et cetera. It's got even more complicated. And we talk about this weekly. But in answer to your question, I really, in emails, it's hard. We don't get somebody's tonality. We can't tell if they're serious or what. So we lose tonality. We lose body language in emails. But one of the things in communication, I think one of the keys is to try to, there's a lot of programs out on public speaking and how to become a better speaker. And I've always found it kind of ironic that there aren't many programs out there on how to be a better listener. But I think to me, one of the keys in communication, everybody communicates, few connect. That's one of the titles of John's book. And to go back with your introduction, one morning, when you go to Amazon to buy a John Maxwell book, be forewarned, he's written over 100 of them.
That's right.
There's quite a bit, but everybody communicates and few connect. So communication, I think, tremendously involves respect, and we have to listen or try to communicate and understand what the other person's meaning is. And so often we listen, and once they say something, we shut off the rest of what they're saying, because all we're thinking about is how we're going to respond or correct them. I heard something just the other day that I really liked, that a good way to increase your listening skills is, now this is a challenge, but I really like this, was when you're listening to somebody, assume that you might be wrong. Just assume that you might be wrong, and that can really heighten your ability to listen or communicate. But again, I get back, and I've seen this, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners have too, if they really think about the number of problems they've run into with vendors, clients, relationships, employees. A lot of it can be traced back to a lack or a miscommunication. The fact is, we don't know this, some of us, and here I point at me, some of us think we're saying something and we're not even saying what we really meant to say. So that's easy to get miss it. I could say, please hand me the red notebook when I meant the green one, and you give me the red notebook, and I go, man, what are you doing? Well, that was on me. So communication, I think one of the keys is to, it involves respect, and it has to be really, really intentional. I don't think it takes that much to separate yourself as a company. I really don't. I think that you have to, and this goes internally and externally. We need to do what we say we're going to do, when we're going to do it, or tell the client or the other party, hey, I'm going to be late, I'm going to miss that or whatever, and just get out in front of things. And that's going to put you way ahead of the competition right there.
Yeah, and that's all about communication, right?
Oh yes.
And there's a lot of understanding that comes on the other side of that, right? If something's coming up, especially, you know, on a commercial project that you're working on for months, or, you know, and hey, we're off on this deadline a little bit. Let's, you know, we have to adjust this, but here's why. Here's an explanation of what's going on, and here's how we're going to get back on our timeline through phase 3, right? Maybe phase 2 or phase 3. We're going to make up for that by, you know, in this, and just having an answer to that, you know, to the issue that comes up, but that the worst thing you can do is not communicate.
Absolutely. And then there's also an old adage, and this deals in communication. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. They just don't care what you know until they know that you care. And but communication, and it becomes a real criteria in leadership, development of your company, and helping other people develop to become better leaders. It's communication and respect are 2 keys to become a better influencer.
Definitely. And that's great. I love that. That's, you know, a lot of times, you know, we don't consciously think about a lot of this stuff, right? We just do on a day-to-day basis, right? And it's, hey, we you know, we got this project going on, and we got to do this, we got to do that, and we just got to go. But if some of the conscious thought that could go behind these things can lead to some, you know, serving your customers on a higher level, serving your employees on a higher level. I know you guys have served your employees on a very high level. It's just like, it's something that I've never heard of. I grew up in a union mining area in northern Minnesota for a part of my life, and my dad worked in the mine and was a union a union guy, a union employee, and you guys had a union shop at one time, but you're not anymore.
Yes, that's not. That's true. And before I get into that, I do want to talk about that a little bit. But one thing, because I'm kind of a scatterbrained guy, but one thing on communication that's really helped us here, and that we preach on, just kind of a follow-up line, is and this has to do with listening and responding. In life, things happen to us. It can be conversations or an incident, and let's call what happens to us for a minute stimulus. Whether that's somebody yelling at us, talking to us, somebody cutting us off in traffic, let's call that what happens to us stimulus. And it's real human nature as to react to stimulus by an automatic reaction that is part of us. It's happened it's been a part of us through a lot of experiences. Stimulus, automatic reaction, which leads to, in some cases, us doing things that we probably wish we hadn't done, or saying things that we probably wish we hadn't said. So we've kind of implemented a thing, and this has really helped in a lot of manners. It's actually a Buddhist type of thought, but it's called the sacred pause. And what that is as opposed to immediately reacting to stimulus, whether that's something somebody said to us or a car cutting us off in traffic, it's just to take a brief pause. And when I say brief, I'm not talking about a lot of minutes. I'm just talking about a couple of breaths or so, and try to thoughtfully respond to that stimulus as opposed to reacting to it. Thoughtfully respond. We call that the sacred pause. And that's something you can practice with intentionality every day and still try to work on. But the sacred pause we found, whether that's in response to a client, a general contractor, a fellow employee, that helps us not say things or do things that we immediately regret. And it makes communication a lot smoother. So
Definitely.
I did get that little
Yeah.
thing.
No, that's great. That is
Now,
definitely something that's actionable, right? You can do that in
yes.
your life on a day-to-day basis, and 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 just that extra couple of seconds can help you put your thought together properly, and have and increase your communication level, right? Increase your communication level, and heighten the way that you heard the person or the stimulus that was coming at you, right? Gives you a little bit of time to process that. I love that. That's great.
Right. Yes. And it really cuts down on me, in my case, doing things that you regret later having done. And I don't know if any of your listeners have ever done that. I sure have said things, and that if I'd have taken a sacred pause, I probably wouldn't say it. Now back, and I'm kind of like the Grateful Dead, Jim. I usually get back to things. So back to the union question. Yes, our company was a union actually for about 50 years. We were members of the AFL-CIO Roofers and Waterproofers Union, and let me lead by saying I don't have anything against unions, so I don't want any big union advocates to get all upset. But what happened so I negotiated a lot of contracts in the time that I started negotiating them in '83, and we eventually moved from a 1 to a 3 to a 5, and our last contract that we had in 2000 was actually a 7-year agreement. And so in 2007, it rolled around again time to update or renew the contract. Now, that being said, we're about 3.5 hours south of Kansas City, and we were a local that was affiliated with, the local was actually based up in Kansas City. But in 2007, after negotiating a series of successful contracts, et cetera, in 2007, and again, this has to do with respect and everything, in 2007, and there was no effort on our part to decertify or anything of that nature. In fact, decertification from a company standpoint is extremely hard to do, but we had started our negotiation for that year, coming off a 7-year program. And after our third meeting in that process, I literally received a letter from the NLRB informing us that the union had decided that they didn't want to represent our people anymore. So we were literally outside of the union. I thought it was kind of a trick to possibly get blamed for negotiating in bad faith or something. But the bottom line is, our guys were satisfied enough with the way we'd been treated them and felt comfortable enough. So at that point in time, we had 21 workers and didn't lose any of them. They all stayed. So, so that good for us.
Yeah. And that story was just a testament to me of like what taking care of your people, right? That you can take care of your employees, because your employees are set, that's your business, right? Without key employees in your business, you're not going to make it. And if you take care of your employees in a great way, and make sure that their pay is good, their benefits maybe, but on another level, like what you're talking about in the company culture and the way that people are treated and how they feel coming to work every day, and becoming, feeling really part of the team that they're on. I think that's a big testament to what you guys have done over there, because and I'm sure it took work, right? There's a lot of evolutions to things.
Right. Oh, yes. Yes, indeed. But what you say is exactly right. And that's one thing so we were doing that. And that's one thing that's really changed how you treat people. It has really evolved and changed, like technology has too.
Yes.
But that, quite frankly, in today's market, take away this virus blimp for a minute, this unique time we're in. But in today's world, you take care of your people, or they're just going to move on down the street. They're simply not going to put up with things the way
That's
they
right.
used to. They're just not going to.
There's 150 contractors in town now, not 4, right?
Yeah,
they have a choice. They have a choice to work for you, just like your clients, your customers have a choice to work with you, right? I think of it a lot. I think a lot of employers miss that, right? If you do good work, you expect your customers, your clients, to refer you, right? Hey, hey, do you know a good roofing company? Oh yeah, Queen City over there. Those guys do a great job for me. But on the other end of that, it's, hey man, I'm looking for a job. Well, yeah, you should come work where I work. These guys take care of us, right? It's a great place to work. I think there's a big factor there sometimes that people miss.
And it also, that's exactly right, Jim. And it also dovetails in, quite frankly, from a selfish standpoint, it dovetails into better production.
It does.
And again, like I said, and I had some less than desirable jobs, through the years that I was working. And for Pete's sakes, roofing is an extremely hard, physical, dirty job. But
that's right.
And I'm not saying by any means that our guys come in every day and it's a party and they look forward to it. But the fact is, the more, in my mind, the more that the guys know that you're concerned about them, it's just going to reflect itself in an up productivity, because and I have to remind my foreman every once in a while. I think there was one summer I was working in a steel mill, and I remember they used to treat their workers. Now this goes back a long time, but they used to treat people like slaves. But the funny thing was, they didn't know. You can yell at a guy or girl, and that person may toe the line and do what you ask them to do for the 5 minutes that you're there. But the fact is, there aren't any supervisors that are on their people 8 hours a day. And I know, because I was one of them, if you mistreat an employee, they may do what you say to do for the next 5 minutes you're watching them. But the balance of the 7 hours and 55 minutes they're working that day, let's just suffice it to say, they're not in a highly productive mode. They can really.
I have 5-year-old twin boys that will attest to that.
Right.
In the same manner, right? If you, hey,
right.
Clean that up, bro, they'll clean it up right there, but they'll make the mess as soon as you walk around the corner. So.
Well, I have news for you. My kids are all now 30 to 40, and that doesn't get for Jim.
It's a forever thing, right? It's a forever thing. You can just keep yelling at them. It might not work out that well. So, being, kind of to that point, or talking about that, like, times have changed a lot, right? I mean, you've been in the business for a lot of years now, and in many different facets, right? Different places in the company. What do you think has changed the most for the better?
I think it's all for the better. I mean, I think a lot of times it's easy to say the good old days, and
yeah,
in real retrospect, the good old days weren't always that good. So I think change, well, it can be argued for the better. For example, I think technology certainly has changed. I mean, I'm back from way before spreadsheets and fax machines. For some of your listeners who weren't even born then, believe it or not, there was a before fax machines, which fax machines now are already pretty much outdated. Now
that's right.
Etc. But there's also a downside on the technology, and that is, for example, when projects come out to bid and the plans and specs and architects now, everything cuts both ways, I think. So not every technological advancement has been good, but it's here. The ability to communicate is here. technology, roofing systems. As I said before, when I started, primarily everybody was simply doing built-up roofing, which goes back to the old heating up asphalt in kettles, 3-ply, 4-ply, gravel or not. And it truly was that simple. Now there's literally hundreds of systems. Modifieds came out, single plies, liquid applied systems. So there's just a plethora of choices now available to people. Technological changes have been and continue to get fast. I think I shared with you, Jim, in our pre-interview about the fact that 30 years ago or so, I heard a famous radio commentator, a guy named Paul Harvey, who was known for his parting good day comment on all his posts. But Paul Harvey spoke in town, and again, this is 30 years ago or so, and talked at that time about the rate of change and how it was accelerating faster and faster. Again, this is 30 years ago. Well, here we are, and when we think back 11 years ago, we didn't have Apples, we didn't have cell phones, let's say, for example, and now they're getting ready to go into their 12th generation or whatever.
Yeah.
The rate of change continues to get faster. So from an individual or a company standpoint, we need to embrace change because it's going to happen. We can either be on the bus or off the bus because it's going to happen. In roofing, for example, a lot of old line companies like mine specifically, and this will probably be news to some of your listeners, but when single ply roofing came in, there were a lot of us old line companies that did the hot roofing or the modified bitumen that just didn't want to acknowledge that it was coming. And I was on the Midwest Roofing Contractors Association board and a participant in the NRCA, but we had some board members that were trying to ignore it and act like it wasn't going to happen. Well, now, I mean, single plies just dominate things. So those companies did not want to change, were simply forced to change. So that's been one of them. Another important change, I think, is I've never been one to knock. You hear so many people say about young kids, oh, these kids nowadays, they just don't want to work. That's a common thing here. And one time I was having dinner with my brother, and he reminded me, man, that's exactly the same type of stuff our dad said to us back when we were kids. So, but how you treat people has changed. For example, I'm a big basketball fan and was a big fan of Bobby Knight's at Indiana basketball. But the fact is, you can't treat people like that anymore because they're going to walk. There's too many options available, and they're going to walk. And I think that's something that's been for the good with all companies. Again, I get down to productivity level. Is somebody going to give you higher energy and better productivity when it's a good working environment and a good place to work, or not? And I know in my case, I would work harder for a company that I enjoyed working for and I thought cared a little bit about me. So those are the two, technology and people are two of the biggest changes I've seen.
Yeah. There's I'm sure there are changes for the worse, but those are definitely changes for the better. The technology, and not like you're saying on in the roofing systems and on the technology side. Are you guys using any technology in your bidding processes now, like for measurements and all that type of stuff? And
it makes me laugh a little bit because again, I'm old school, but after reading Rich Dad Poor Dad to kind of go through a fast evolution. So that was in the late 90s. So I decided then I made a business decision that I was really going to start investing in people. And by that, I shared with you earlier, at that point in time, our company had been actually the small amount of money we were making was because on a lack of spending on overhead, if that makes sense. I decided I was going to invest in people and not continue to do things the way I had. We can't do it all ourselves. Anybody that tries is can absolutely do it for a while, but you're going to burn out real quickly. So I started investing in people, and I think a lot of smaller business people, in my opinion, Jim, have what I call their binoculars on backwards. And that is, they're afraid to invest in people because they'd rather have money in their own pocket. And that's real short-sighted. None of us can do as much. And I tell this to my foreman all the time. You may be able to outwork one person. You may be able to outwork two. But, man, you simply can't outwork 3 or 4 people. So collectively then try to invest in people, help develop them. And that's paid off in spades for me personally and for our company here. Developed a great team.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. Well, what would you, what like one insight would you share with someone that's just been kind of the baseline of what you found for your success in business and life?
Continue to really focus on being a learner and continually try to personally develop and professionally develop. I think those are key, regardless of your position in any company, regardless of your position, from be that a field worker, an estimator, a project manager, an office administrator, a receptionist, but start to really focus on how can I become a better person? How can I get better at my job? How can I help the company or the community more? Those I think are really key for a lot of reasons, for a whole lot of reasons. But that would be the advice that I would give. And because what a lot of people don't realize is we're all leaders in one way or another. It's just like everybody has a roof maintenance program. They may not have their program. They may not really have one. Their program may be, I'll call a roofer if my roof leaks. Well, that is a program. It's not a good one, but that's a program. In a similar vein, we're all leaders. A lot of times when I make presentations and talk about leadership, people go, that doesn't apply to me. I'm not a leader. I would argue that we're all leaders because leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So even when you have an encounter, if you go into Starbucks with your barista or local coffee shop with your barista, you go out to order something to eat, you go to your family and deal with your spouse or your children, we all are influencing people. And I mean, influencing in the best way, not manipulating. And that's what leadership is, if you think about it. Now, there's different levels of leadership, but the better we can develop our own level of leadership is going to help us do, be, and have more, and help our companies do, be, and have more. So that would be the advice I'd give anybody. Really focus and take the time to work on things that are important but not urgent, and that takes some intentionality. Take time for quiet reflection. Take time for self-improvement, and it doesn't have to be a lot. It can be 15, 30 minutes a day, because it's a process that adds up. What happens is a lot of us get so focused and so in the woods, we can't see the forest for the trees type of thing, when in actuality, and that can go on, that I did that for 20 years, but if you're not careful, you'll wake up, it's 20 years later, and nothing's different except you're really, really tired. Where a little time in personal reflection and intentionally choosing to develop yourself personally and professionally has rewards beyond comparison.
That's great. Well, thank you, Larry. This has been a great conversation. Loved having you on here. This has been another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast.
Thank you very much, Jim.
If you would like to generate more sales through your digital marketing efforts, please visit roofermarketers.com and get a copy of the book, Internet Marketing for Roofing Contractors: How to Triple Your Sales and Turn Your Roofing Website into an Online Lead Generation Machine. Also, check the training section of the website for guides on everything from running effective pay-per-click ads to how to properly set up your Google My Business listing. This has been another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast. Thanks for listening.